Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to associate myself with the comments of Tim Kaine. The fact that we're 5 months into this, and this is the first oversight hearing, is really a complete failure of the responsibility of Congress, failure of this committee to demand oversight, but also a reflection of the reluctance of the administration to engage in the proper consultation with Congress. So I hope we can do a lot better going forward, and that we'll see you at least every 6 weeks or so, not every five months. I also feel like the strategy of keeping basically these very weak arguments secret so that they can't be discussed openly for the legal justifications. I've gone down and read them, and there's a reason, obviously you'd be incredibly embarrassed if those were public, so make them public. Let's have an actual transparency here in the United States of America. And let's be clear about what has gone on. We had a dictator we didn't like. We've replaced it with a dictator we think we can manipulate. And if that doesn't work, we'll do something else in order to pry open that economy for oil. And I must say that you did say something I liked. So let me emphasize that.
I'm making progress.
Yeah. You said no U.S. taxpayer dollars will be used, no spending on our part, to kind of prop up Venezuela. Can you restate your commitment to that?
Yeah, they're not going to need it. For example, we're not spending money in Venezuela right now. I mean, obviously, look, I think you're putting aside embassy operations and all of that. And by the way, there may be some program through foreign aid that some of you might be interested in the future. We don't think that Venezuela is the kind of country that needs that. This is a very wealthy country.
Thank you. I'm glad you restated that, because I think that we will see some moment when the administration says, let's subsidize our American oil companies to rebuild the infrastructure in Venezuela. And I must say that's a very unpopular idea among my constituents. I think America needs a lot of investments in infrastructure here. And I think you have a way too rosy sense of the oil economy there. Many experts have said, look, without 10-year prospect horizon of stability, without Canada deciding to ship a lot more of its heavy oil instead of to the Gulf, doing it to Asia so that we prop up the kind of demand in the Gulf, without keeping Iran off the international stage so that the cost of oil, the value is higher. All of those factors would have to be there for our oil companies to want to invest their own money. So I think they'll be coming to the administration. I think you'll all be trying to find some way to subsidize them. But I'm glad what you said today, that you're not going to do it, and I want to hold the administration accountable to that. Second, on terms of the $500 million fund, $300 million, my understanding, has gone back to the Central Bank of Venezuela, and they have essentially exchanged it for bolivars to key industry players. I don't think we have any transparency on what corporations or entities got that hard currency, and yet you did say there's going to be a lot of transparency. You also said, if I understood right, that those funds are eventually going to be brought back into the structure of U.S. control as part of our, formal structure of funds. And in that sense, the Constitution says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made in law. So are you going to make sure that if that money comes back into kind of full U.S. control, not an offshore account the way it is now, that we're going to abide by the Constitution? Third point here is that one of the things that transpired is cutting off the oil to Cuba. And I know you have a strong interest in making life difficult for the leadership in Cuba. Can you lay out for us what other things you might be planning in that regard and how those fit into an overall plan?
Yeah, well, I'll try to do that in a minute. Let me just say on the rosy projections of oil, it's not rosy projection. I mean, it's either going to happen or it's not. In essence, oil, there's no world in which the United States is subsidizing investment in Venezuelan oil. It's very simple. Oil company will go in and say, okay, this is the oil you have. This is how much it's going to cost us investing on the front end to one end make money, pay back our investment plus a profit at the back end. And then depending on the terms of that investment, they'll make a decision about whether it makes sense for that or not. Right now, what you have in Venezuela is a corrupt and broken oil company run by the government that basically takes this money, doesn't reinvest in it at all, and basically sprinkles it to its people to keep the glue that keeps the regime together. We want it to become a normal oil economy. That's what the ultimate goal is here. And in a normal oil economy, companies are going to go in, they're going to look at Venezuelan law, they're going to look at Venezuelan authorities, and they're going to make a determination about whether or not it's worth their investment. And that's the normalization process that we're talking about. That's going to be up to them if they want to have a normal oil economy as opposed to one that is basically used as a way to feed graft in a very inefficient way, but they didn't care about that. If they do it the right way, we think it has great promise and potential over the long term, especially because these investments take a long time. But the U.S. doesn't have to put any money to encourage companies to go in and invest, nor is there any interest in doing so. But a lot of it
That's a point I really do appreciate.
Yeah, no,
I don't want to see.
Well, I don't even think
American
that's even
taxpayer
been.
dollars going in.
I don't think that's even been discussed or considered by anybody. Your second point was, I wrote it here, but now.
It's the $300 million
Since I left here,
being
I've had to start
redistributed
using
to
these. I
corporations in Venezuela. And
The second one was what, I'm sorry?
lack of accountability over that. The $300
Oh,
million
yeah.
has already been distributed.
On the account. So that's not the permanent structure we want to see. In the long term, we just want them to have a normal industry where the companies are involved in there, they're selling it directly to the market, and we're out of that game. What we're talking about now is the sanctioned oil, the oil that's under our sanction. So we have to monitor how that money moves. So yes, the first 300 million moved for the following reason. We would all agree we didn't want to see systemic collapse. Like one of the things a lot of you told me you were worried about on the short term is this is going to trigger internal chaos in Venezuela. 1 million people are going to storm the border with Colombia. Colombia even stood up troops to their border to prevent it. Brazil was worried about it as well. It's going to lead to fighting in the streets between rival factions and shooting. None of that has happened. And key to that stabilization is ensuring that the government had enough money to meet payroll and meet their basic needs as part of the stabilization. We should not confuse stabilization with transition. This is not what the permanent structure is going to look like. The Treasury's handling the structuring of that account, so I would refer you to them, and I can get you an answer for them as to what the legal framework of that Treasury blocked account is going to look like.
That would be very helpful, because what you just mentioned, money to meet payroll, is very different than what we've heard about the money being used to give hard currency to key corporations inside of Venezuela, which would not be meeting payroll.
Well, which
This is where complete oversight is required.
Well,
we'd like to have transparency over how that's being
Yeah, remember, the first 300 million we're going to have to, on that one, because of the urgency in moving funds to keep the place stable, is going to require us to undertake a retroactive audit of how that money was spent, the first 300 million. But there's probably another 2.5 to 3 billion down the pike at some point, which will have front end through this process I described. I'm not sure if you were here where I described it, and we're still finalizing it. But basically, the way it would look is we would send them a letter saying, on the sanctioned oil proceeds, this is what it could be spent on, and you have to agree to contribute, you have to agree to pay for an auditing system to make sure that that's how it's being spent. That's the process we're trying to create. Again, on Friday will mark the 4-week mark of this all began. I understand, we live in a world where the items move very quickly. This was front page news of 3 weeks ago when we scheduled this hearing, and today other items have captured the attention, but we remain focused on it. So it's only been 3 or 4 weeks, but that's the process we're setting up with Treasury, and obviously as we finalize it, we'll provide that to you. But this is not permanent. This is not the system we want to see in place in the long term. We want to see a normal country. What was your third question?
Cuba.
Oh, Cuba.
Cuba.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you about Cuba.
Thanks.